Hi, everyone. Welcome to Volunteering with Your Pet. My name is Jessie Haas. I am the Senior National Director of the Therapy Animal Program at Pet Partners, and I want to thank you so much for spending some time with me today. This presentation is all about what it means to be a volunteer with Pet Partners together with your pet, what a therapy animal visit looks like, and the various steps you can take to join Pet Partners with your pet as a therapy animal team. So it's mostly designed for folks who are prospective, you're just learning about Pet Partners. But if you are a current volunteer, please hang out. We love having you here. You are more than welcome to jump in the comments, answer questions, share your perspectives and your experiences with Pet Partners. So again, thank you for being here. If you wouldn't mind, if you are listening, please feel free to type in the comments on Facebook where you're from and what kind of pet you have. Specifically, I'm wondering if you have a dog, cat, horse, rabbit, although you can tell me the species if you'd like as well. It's always useful for me to know who I'm talking to. And then, of course, depending on species, I can adjust the information I provide a little bit today. So as I begin, please feel free to type those things in. I would very much appreciate it. And we'll get started. We could go to the first slide. I have somebody helping me on the background here. Okay, great. There it is. So I usually like to start by telling folks where you visit with your pet, and then I'll move into what those visits look like. I think that gives a nice foundation for understanding what I'll cover later, which is our requirements and steps, because those requirements and steps are built upon what occurs at a visit and where those visits happen. One other thing before I dive in, I should mention when I talk about a team, and I'll say that often in the next 20 minutes of presenting, I'm speaking of you plus your pet create a team. Together you are a team. Sometimes people think we're talking about teams of volunteers. A team from Minneapolis all went and visited a hospital together. But when I say team, I mean that one-to-one relationship between you and your animal. So places where therapy animals visit, everything is listed up on your screen there to give you a good sense of the breadth and diversity of places where our teams visit. This list is not exhaustive, however. Thousands of facilities invite Pet Partners teams into their location or into their site. And so I can't possibly represent all of them here, but you can see some examples. Lots of healthcare environments, lots of educational environments, but also more unique places like airports are places where teams may find themselves. So next up, I'm going to talk about what visits look like, or what is it that you do when you're on a visit. So the most common type of visit that a Pet Partners team does is something we call a social visit. And that might sound casual, but they can be very, very high impact. They are an opportunity for you and your animal to go into one of the settings we just showed and reduce somebody's isolation, brighten their day. And that can have some pretty seriously beneficial outcomes for both their mental, emotional, and physical health as well. Other visits are more structured, and those will often take place with a professional, like a physical therapist or an occupational therapist. This is where the professional obviously has oversight over a patient, but they invite a volunteer team to come in and provide some supplementation to their treatment plan. So I'll give you an example. Some teams go into rehabilitation centers. There might be a physical therapist working with somebody after a surgery and they need to regain fine motor skills. And they may have their patient brush or pet your animal as part of the exercises they're working through to gain back some of that those fine motor skills and that movement. So those are a little bit more structured than social visits. Also very popular are reading visits or literacy-based visits. This is where a team goes into, most often, a school or a library, and they meet with children or early learners of reading, and the people read to their pet. And pets and animals in these environments can be wonderful motivation. So somebody who's not feeling like practicing their reading and suddenly a rabbit comes in and they're like, oh, now I want to practice my reading. Also, animals can feel very non-judgmental to students or children who might have some shyness around reading out loud, and suddenly it becomes more approachable when they're with an animal. Last but not least are stress break visits. These are similar to social visits, but they are happening in environments that might be a little bit more high stress. So consider a university campus during finals week. Many teams might be present in the atrium or the student center, and allow those students to de-stress by interacting with their pet. So that's an overview of the types of visits. Once again, not exhaustive, but a good taste for you. We can hop to the next slide. I see we've got a couple of joiners. Again, if you're joining late and you didn't hear me say this at the very top, I would love to know where you're from, and what kind of animal or pet you have. I see we have Wendy with a llama from New Hampshire, which is a great person or comment for me to have read as I talk about the different species that Pet Partners accepts. Most people think of dogs as therapy animals, but Pet Partners really believes and supports the research that shows that it is a broad diversity of species that can provide the healing power of the human-animal bond. They have that ability to bond with human, so we accept far more than dogs. You can see the list here. Let's go to the next slide. So now you know where visits take place, you know what they look like, you know what our animals might be, but let's talk about what the commitment for you as a person is. So you get to arrange visits yourself based on your schedule and availability. We don't have any minimum number of hours you have to visit in any given week, month, or year. We don't say visits have to be at least 90 minutes. It is really up to you. The only thing I will say about timing is, in fact, we don't allow teams to visit more than 2 hours a day, because even though animals involved with Pet Partners love this volunteerism and they have a lot of joy for doing it, it also can be very exhausting for them. All of the attention, all of the moving around, all of the petting. So we do, for the animal's well-being, limit you to 2 hours a day. But besides that, it's really up to you. We have some volunteers that visit 2 or 3 times a week, some volunteers that visit 2 or 3 times a month, and some that might only visit 2 or 3 times a year, and that is all acceptable. As you're thinking about whether or not this fits into your schedule, I will say that beyond the visits, you do need to consider some of the time investment both before and after a visit. Your animal needs to be well groomed before you show up at a facility, and then afterwards, as I mentioned, they tend to be somewhat tired or fatigued, so you need to ensure your animal has a quiet space and time to unwind after a visit. Welcome also to Debbie and Jane, who chimed in, a couple of dogs. Wonderful to have you. So if what I've said so far is appealing to you, you feel like this kind of volunteerism would be fun for you and for your pet, something they would enjoy, let's talk about eligibility. So rabbits and other pocket pets like guinea pigs and rats need to be at least 6 months old. All other animals need to be at least 1 year. Birds need to have lived with their owners for 1 year. All other species for at least 6 months. So what that means is you might adopt a 3-year-old cat. And so they meet the age requirement, but you are not eligible to be evaluated and proceed until that cat has lived with you for 6 months. And the primary reason for that is so much of a successful therapy animal visit is in the relationship between the two of you. So we want to ensure you have time to build that before you go through this process. All animals must be house trained, and they all must wear either a collar or harness and a leash, and that also goes for our small animals. Obviously, whether they wear a collar or a harness, for a dog, it's personal preference. For some of our larger species, it's certainly going to be, a halter, harness, lead situation. So that'll look different for each species, but what I want to point out there is they must always be under your management by a leash or a lead. Animals cannot be fed a raw protein diet. This is for infection prevention and control reasons. Animals cannot have a history of aggression of any type towards other animals or people. And of course, we want animals to be healthy enough to participate in the program happily. So a little bit more on that one. We have plenty of animals in the program who do have a disability or who do take daily medication, might have a chronic health issue. All of that can be acceptable, but just a couple of caveats. First of all, we still want to make sure the animal is comfortable to visit. We don't want an animal who has a health issue that makes them less comfortable leaving their home. And also, there are some medications that are disallowed. So if your animal has a health concern, I just want you to know, doesn't mean they can't participate, but if they have something ongoing, you should reach out to Pet Partners. There's a contact button on every page of our website. Let us know what's going on with your animal. That way we can help answer yes or no for you before you get too far in the process. And obedience skills are going to be important for every species. We'll talk a little bit about those in just a moment. Let's talk about what makes a successful therapy animal. So if your animal meets the requirements, those are all the basics. Now, this is the special sauce of what a therapy animal is. Of course, they need to be people-oriented, sociable, and friendly. But even more than that, they need to be people-oriented, sociable, and friendly with a wide variety of people who they do not know. So it's important to assess how your animal does with strangers and how your animal does with strangers in a strange environment. And sometimes those environments can be distracting as well. And even if an environment isn't stressful for your animal, it's just distracting, you do want to think about your animal having the capability of, even when distractions are going on, to be able to maintain relatively good focus on the person they are interacting with. Because what we don't want to have happen at a therapy animal visit is your animal is focusing on everything over here and not on the person they're intending to visit. Now, therapy animals aren't robots, of course. There are going to be times where animals are going to get distracted. There are going to be times where they don't feel like interacting with a particular person, and that is okay. I'm just speaking from sort of a, what is their normal set point? Can they focus on people even when there's exciting things going on all around them? Of course, they need to have good basic obedience skills. As I mentioned on the previous slide, this is going to look a little different for different species. I know we have a llama handler tuning in, and I don't have time to go through each animal's specific obedience skills, but what we do have online, if you have a volunteer center account with us, which you can create, it's totally free, easy to do. You do that online, and then you're able to see some documents and information that is intended specifically for prospective or current volunteers. There's even a resource library that you can Google around and take a look at different documents. And in there, we have behavior packets, for example, for llamas, the evaluation overview for llamas. So you can really get a good sense of what those obedience skills look like for species. For dogs, as you can imagine, it's going to be sit, down, stay, come when called, those basic obedience skills that dog owners know pretty well. I think we'll go to the next slide. I think the other points are self-explanatory. It is really, really common for all of us to want to focus on the animal, the pet. What are their requirements? What do they need to be like? But we at Pet Partners put as much emphasis on the human end of the leash as we do on the pet. And you'll hear this when we talk about the evaluation and how we look at you as a team. But handlers also need to be friendly and professional and polite, of course, and be able to do that in a variety of different environments, sometimes under stressful conditions. We are looking for handlers who are able to predict and redirect their animal's behavior. So I talked earlier about the importance of that relationship with your pet before you start this journey. And when you have that good relationship, you're able to see a challenge or an obstacle in the distance or a situation you can see coming, and you think, that's not going to set my animal up for success. How can I manage this situation so that my pet can be successful and won't have any misbehavior? So there's a lot of prediction and what we call proactive handling, not reactive handling. You don't wait until your pet is in a situation that's more difficult. You see that situation coming. As a handler, it's always important to remember that your animal's well-being is your number one priority. Your number one priority is not to the facility, say the hospital who invited you. Your number one priority is not the patients at the hospital. It is your pet. That is how we ensure everybody stays safe and interactions are effective, is when you focus on your animal first and foremost. And then, of course, we have a lot of policies and procedures for our volunteers, and we require all of our handlers to follow those at all times. So up on your screen is not every single step involved in becoming a Pet Partners Therapy Animal Team, but it's kind of the key steps. There are some other administrative steps. There is a background check you have to consent to, but these are sort of the four main milestones or touch points. So we already talked about creating your volunteer center account. Even if you're not ready to begin a registration with your animal, you can still create the account, poke around, inform yourself. That's great. But then you do need to launch a registration. So that means you say, essentially in a virtual way, I'd like to become a team. I'm ready to submit my information. And then steps 2 and 4, we're going to dive into quite a bit here in terms of the required education and also the evaluation or assessment of your team. But I will just mention step 3 here and also say that's an important milestone or touch point. You do need to have some forms submitted from your veterinarian. Obviously, that helps us ensure your animal is healthy and capable of visits. Keep in mind with that form, you may not have to make a special visit to your vet. If you just visited them 6 weeks ago, they can completely fill that form out with the information from that visit. So in the next couple of slides, we're going to dive into step 2 and 4. And feel free, if you are watching, you can type in questions, comments, things you want to hear more about, and I'll stop and look for them, or I'll make sure I get to them at the end. So as you think of them, please feel free to type them in. So I mentioned earlier that Pet Partners places a large emphasis on the human end of the leash. And so we require all new handlers to take a therapy animal handler course. This is not a course where your pet is involved. The majority of prospective teams will take this handler training online. It is offered in some communities on a limited basis in person, but even when it is in person, your pet still doesn't come. This is an opportunity for you to learn about concepts that I just explained around being able to predict animal behavior. What does a proactive handler look like? How do you advocate for your animal? How do you ensure their well-being? And also walks through a lot of different scenarios about how to facilitate interactions between your pet and the patient, client, or student with whom you might be visiting. So that human end of the leash is what the handler training is all about. Once you've completed your handler training, you are able to sign up for an evaluation and attend the evaluation. In fact, you can sign up for the evaluation before you actually complete the course, but you cannot go to the evaluation until the course is completely done. I should mention, I missed this on the last slide, the online course takes somewhere between 4 and 6 hours, and you can come and go from it. You can do an hour today and an hour over the weekend. That's totally acceptable. Once it is complete, then you can actually attend your evaluation. The evaluation has, anywhere between 20 and 26 exercises. It really depends on the species. And even amongst dogs, there are slightly different exercises if you have a very small dog that is carried versus a dog that always has 4 on the floor. But 20-ish to 26 exercises is what you go through. The first half of the exercises are those basic obedience skills we talked about. The second half of the evaluation is what we call the aptitude portion, and it is testing your aptitude to navigate situations you are likely to see on a therapy animal visit. So we simulate those types of things. So you will be approached by somebody who is using a piece of medical equipment like a walker or a wheelchair. You will hear a loud noise made to see how your animal reacts. Your animal will have to pass by a toy that's sitting on the ground to ensure that they can, like I said earlier, be able to handle distractions and not get off course too much. These evaluations are delivered by a licensed Pet Partners evaluator. And then in the room as well during the evaluation are 3 evaluation assistants. They help the evaluator do those simulations. So when we are taking a look at how your animal does and how you do when your pet is crowded by 3 people all wanting a chance to interact, those assistants will be the folks involved in that simulation. Almost done here on evaluation, but really, really critical to understand that the evaluation is a team evaluation. Half of the score is determined by you as the human, and half of the score is determined by the pet. So your animal could be a rock star and do everything perfectly, but if you aren't modeling handler behaviors, you won't pass the evaluation. Um, if you go into the volunteer center, you take a look at our documents, if you look at the score sheets or the evaluation overviews, you will have a really good sense before you get there about the things we expect to see in our handlers. So using that crowded petting simulation I mentioned earlier, a role that a handler can play is reassuring their animal, oh, you're doing great. Somebody wants a pet. Could we please go one at a time? Let's take turns. So that's kind of assessing your ability to advocate for your animal in what can be a stressful situation. So it is a team evaluation, and lots of information exists about it before you actually have to get there and do it. Almost done here. I think we just got one or two more slides. So here are the benefits of registering with Pet Partners. I'll allow you to just read those. I do want to point out that the first one is really critical. We provide liability insurance for all volunteers once you are registered. Nearly every facility is going to require you to show proof of insurance for bringing an animal into a space like a hospital or school or whatnot. We cover that for you. In fact, our registration fees only pay a portion of what that insurance would cost, and we supplement the rest with grants and fundraising and things like that. So this is a huge benefit of your registration. I'll also just expand a little bit on the second bullet point. Once you start volunteering and you really get the hang of it, after a year or two, you realize you want to get better and better at it. There is a professionalism that our handlers can bring to the volunteerism that they're doing out there. So we try to respond to that need by creating continuing education and coursework, much of it for free. So it's not like you join Pet Partners and you take the handlers course and that's it. We try to make sure that at various points in your journey, you receive additional training, including additional training with specific types of populations, such as veterans or those who are living with Alzheimer's. And I think that's it. So I'm going to take a peek through the comments here, see if there are any questions. Please type them in if you have them, because I would love to answer them. So wonderful to have you, and thank you for all of the hours you gave with your cat. Cats can be really special out there. Same with llamas. I mean, obviously we love our dogs and they make up 93 or 94% of all the teams that we have, but there definitely are situations where a different species can be so therapeutic to people. Maybe somebody who's fearful of dogs or allergic to dogs, or in the case of llamas, it can be a really neat educational experience for people to learn about the actual species of llama. They may have never met a llama before. So that can be a really powerful part of visiting with some of our less common species. I'm not seeing too many other questions come in today. So I am more than happy to wrap this up. You see my email address up there. I also mentioned to you that there's a contact button on every page of the website. If you have any specific questions about your animal's eligibility, or about visitation and volunteerism in general, I'm more than happy to help you. I see Deborah came in with a question about crisis training. I'm happy to cover that real quick, and then we'll end this. But Pet Partners has a special certification called Animal Assisted Crisis Response, or AACR. That's the acronym that we use. Once you have been a team with us for 6 months, so you've got some sort of general visits under your belt, you can elect to take another course in crisis response and receive that credential. And this allows you to be deployed into situations that are particularly high stress, particularly crisis situations. So we have teams that will go visit in school districts after there has been sad to say, a shooting or an act of violence. We have had teams respond after natural disasters or community disasters, such as when that very unfortunate incident of the bridge collapse in Baltimore. We had teams who visited people involved or affected by that after the fact. And so the training really goes in depth into how do you manage yourself and your animal in these crisis situations that can often be very chaotic and very, very emotional. Some regular visits can feel chaotic and emotional, but as you can imagine, some of the things I just described almost really bring it up another level. And so teams who feel called to do that, we want to make sure that they feel trained appropriately for handling that kind of situation. So that's what AACR is. Thank you for the question, Jane. I appreciate it. And with that, I will say goodbye and wish everybody a wonderful weekend. Thanks for joining me. Bye now.